Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
I only remember part of my freshman year of college because of Everclear. Right.
Best times I don't remember having.
Right, right. And you can easily die. You can easily overdose on that, right? Like, a handle of liquor, of a potent liquor, can easily kill a grown man. I mean, so we're talking about something that kills people every year, thousands of people every year, compared to something that there's never been a recorded overdose death from. Oh, so the comparison is just striking to see that we're continuing to prohibit this plant that does so little harm compared to another substance that we widely accept. It's just bizarre.
Let's skewer another legend, if you will, urban legend. And this is something you and I encountered on the aforementioned Vincent A. Buddy Cianci radio show.
Yes.
There's a certain character who regularly trolls the radio shows who...
Pat from Cumberland?
No, that's the other one.
Right.
Hey, listen, I just made nationals, okay? when trolling becomes an Olympic sport, as it's supposed to in Melbourne, all right, I'm there. Okay? I'm on the team. But there's the make it up as you go along theory, where facts. Who needs stinking facts?
Yeah.
So one of the myths that's being perpetrated is that in Colorado, you literally have children passed out stoned in the hallways. In places around the world where there's been legalization, is there any significant increase in the use of cannabis?
There isn't. We've seen that with medical marijuana laws, for instance, that there's been no increase in teen use as a result of medical marijuana laws. We found the same thing with decriminalization. If you look at Amsterdam, where they've allowed these sort of de facto legal coffee shops where they sell cannabis, they actually have about half the usage rates among teens that we have in the United States. So there's really no evidence at all that this prohibition policy prevents teen use. And finally, just one last thing. In Colorado, they did a study that came out in 2014 looking at 40,000 high school and middle school students, and they haven't seen an increase in marijuana use since 2005. So it's stayed flat during a period of time where there's been the burgeoning of the medical marijuana, but then, of course, the legalization measure that passed in 2012. So we haven't seen an increase as been predicted.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, in Amsterdam, they've seen a gradual decline in overall use.
Yes.
Where I know recently, and I'm not sure if that's the case anymore, they kind of tried to restrict consumption to residents of Amsterdam.
In
so
certain
it wasn't
parts, yeah.
right. It wasn't so much of a tourist trade thing anymore, where
Right.
American kids are going over to Amsterdam
Yeah.
because they can eat space cakes for a week and not have to worry about getting caught. But even amongst adults, they've seen a gradual decline in usage over the past 20, 30 years since it's been decriminalized and legalized.
Yeah, well, compared to other European countries, the Netherlands has lower usage rates overall, adults and young people. And so, again, it just goes to show you, if you listen to one of the speeches that the drug czar over there gave at one point, someone asked him how he's been so successful in keeping teen marijuana use down. He said, well, we made pot boring. We made it boring. We said, yeah, you can have it, knock yourself out. And what happened is it lost its allure. It lost this sort of forbidden fruit aspect. Here in the United States, we villainize it, we demonize it, we tell all this propaganda. And I think for a lot of young people, they feel, cool. It creates some type of forbidden fruit aspect to it that makes it more alluring. And they've eliminated that. They've made it boring. And that's what we need to do here.
But there's a secondary aspect of that, too, where if a kid grows up in a household or in an area or in a school system that's constantly telling him that, here's this drug that's going to make you crazy and it's going to make you jump out of windows, and they finally try this thing and it's nothing like what anybody has told them. I think that what happens is their view of other drugs becomes skewed as well. If they told me this about pot,
right,
and it's not that bad, then what about all these horror stories about cocaine and heroin and acid and magic mushrooms and all these other, So, I think that there's this... that's where the danger to me of this kind of boogeyman aspect of that to me is the gateway.
Absolutely.
And the narrative that we push acts more of a gateway than the actual substance.
Absolutely. I think you're hitting such an important point, which is the government and adults in general lose so much credibility when they try to compare marijuana to something like heroin, which that's what the federal government does. It classifies heroin and marijuana the same way as a Schedule I drug. And kids are smart. Kids see this. Teenagers see this, and they see people using marijuana. Their grades don't plummet. They see people using marijuana. They don't ruin their lives. And they say, wait a minute, I've been told all my life that this is some terrible, horrible thing. It's going to melt my brain. And yet, at the same time, I'm seeing people use it, and they're fine. And that erodes the credibility of government. It erodes the credibility of adults, which is a really dangerous thing for the reasons that you said.
Now, on to one of our favorite subjects. Now, full disclosure here. 2 of the 3 hosts on this radio show right now are libertarians. The third one is on his way to becoming one. Right. So,
I'm the Green Party liaison for the Rhode Island Libertarian Party.
There we go.
Right. And, of course, the 2 hosts represent what, Tony? About 70% of the Libertarian Party?
More like 90%.
Of the Libertarian Party in Rhode Island. But that's
By weight?
By
sheer girth.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tough room.
Come on, I can't do this when we're on the regular radio.
One of our favorite subjects if you're libertarian is the WOD, which is not weapons of mass destruction, but the war on drugs. Or, as a great series of episodes in Saturday Night Live, Laura once said, it all leads to beer. The war on drugs, an epic political, financial, sociological, philosophical, moral, and calculable failure on every single level. So let's go through the war on drugs. In a snapshot, the government spends billions and billions and billions of dollars trying to eradicate a product that in many parts of the world is completely legal and, if used properly, is completely safe. So let's go over some of the repercussions of the war on drugs. First of all, again, we talked initially about the health crisis that's being perpetrated by black market cannabis provided through unknown distribution channels. That's the first issue. So let's then take it a couple of steps off of that. Healthcare costs as a result of where were we last year in terms of deaths from synthetic marijuana last year? We were
in the hundreds, if not thousands. Yeah.
Right. So you've got the costs related to that, which are, of course, when you're talking about human life, are incalculable.
Which can I just pick one thing? I hate when people call it synthetic marijuana because this stuff is just random chemicals cooked up in someone's basement.
Right.
It's supposed to look kind of like marijuana, but it has no relation to any cannabinoids or any. So I just wanted to throw that.
No, that's an excellent point. Let's look at the issue just from a cost perspective. Now, as libertarians here in Rhode Island, which is the crony capitalist corporate headquarters of America, in fact, I'm surprised Skefco hasn't found a way to make money.
We're going to make a sign about that next to the airport.
Right. The prison industry. How many people, are imprisoned for low-level lifestyle crimes or find themselves members of the new, call it industrial judicial industry here in this country as a result of essentially a lifestyle crime?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we know that nationally, over 2 million people are under the thumb of the criminal justice system. That means either in probation, parole, or in prison for a drug offense. The vast majority of those are for possession. So it's an astounding amount of people. The United States has less than 5% of the world's total population, but we have 25% of the world's prison population. We have more people incarcerated than any other country in the history of the world.
We're number one.
It's absolutely insane.
We're number one.
So now let's take a ton then the life-changing effects of being members of said system.
Yeah.
You're creating a permanent class of underemployed individuals who will never be able to contribute to society and never recognize any sort of life whatsoever.
Right. Think about what happens to someone who is incarcerated for a drug offense. They get out, and now they're trying to reintegrate in society, and every employer is going to say, well, have you been to jail before? And they say, yeah, I've got this record. Okay, now they can't get employed. They try to get housing. They can't get housing because they can't live within certain distances of other felons. They've got all these restrictions on what type of programs they can be part of. So what are they going to do? They're going to go back to what they know. They're going to go back to dealing drugs. That's the only option that they have economically to live. And so that's what we're creating, a system where recidivism is so high because we're not actually creating a bridge for people when they get out. So we're stigmatizing them for the rest of their life for a small amount of drugs. It makes no sense. When we have an addict, when we have someone that truly needs some assistance, that person needs treatment. That person needs counseling, not incarceration. The stigma and the being labeled a felon is just another obstacle to their recovery. So we're setting them up for failure, and we do that with millions of people. And then think about the families. Think about the children of these offenders. Think about the spouses of these people. Those are also people caught in this terrible war that we don't often think about. But those are often the most tragic stories. Is the family families that get ruined by these arrests and these
and I always find it really laughable that the so-called party of family values are the same ones that push for these insane drug laws that basically rip families apart.
Absolutely.
Good fathers, good mothers being taken away from their children for weeks, years, months at a time, sometimes decades.
Yep.
Let's not kid ourselves. If you happen to have an ounce of weed in your house and also happen to have a box of Ziploc bags that you use to package up your kids' lunch.
Yep.
That can be considered grounds for we're going to charge you distribution.
Right.
You have all of the means at your disposal.
Right.
All you're doing is throwing a PBJ in that sandwich bag and throwing it in your kid's lunch.
Right.
It's just amazing to me how these laws get abused by law enforcement, particularly in the prosecutorial phase, get abused by the boots on the ground law enforcement, the cops that are coming into the home.
Right.
Probable cause when a police officer enters your home, probable cause is a really low number. To see that one roach in an ashtray, that water pipe sitting on a shelf is probable cause. They can now search your home for whatever they choose.
And let's use that as a segue to go on to the next social implication of the failed war on drugs. When you study some of the statistics about levels of incarceration or the punishment accorded to members of the inner city or certain ethnic or racial communities as a result of this low barrier to probable cause, compare that to white upper middle class suburbs and the same type of crimes, yet other studies would indicate that they're both occurring at the same pace.
Yep.
You start to understand why you have Baltimore, why you have this rash of hatred between members of the inner city, all right, white, black, or as we found out last weekend when we had the folks from Providence in, of the Asian community, against local law enforcement because they're using these lifestyle, quote-unquote, air quote, crimes, all right, as a blunt force trauma tool to inflict the police into the homes of that entire community. So look at what's happened in our cities lately because the folks who live in the inner city see police departments as an invasive force.
Absolutely.
They do not see them as officer-friendly. They do not see them as the dare cop. They do not see them as their friend. They see them as someone who's there to turn them into a statistic. So cities like Baltimore, cities like Staten Island and Brooklyn and New York City, all across the country we see racial unrest that can as a direct trigger of the failed war on drugs.
Absolutely.
What's been the cost of that to this country?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're seeing the cost of it. We're seeing these cities burn, and you're seeing that there's just a huge outpouring of rage. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't also bring up the asset forfeiture laws that we've seen tear apart communities as well. So, a lot of folks don't understand this, but a police officer that finds someone with just a wad of cash, no drugs, no necessarily any other evidence, just a wad of cash, they can say that they're suspecting that that's involved in a drug deal. They can seize that cash and anything else that's involved. They can seize cars, they can seize homes, and they've done this. There was just a story a couple of days ago about a young man who was in Chicago. He had saved up $16,000 to start his career in the music industry. He was taking a train to L.A., He's black, of course. He got searched and singled out by the cops who were searching the train. They found his $16,000. Didn't find anything else. Found no drugs. Found no evidence that he had used drugs or anything like that. They seized his money and took away this kid's dream of being in the music industry simply because of this law. Now, they don't have to even convict you of a drug charge to keep that money. They just have to say, we had reasonable suspicion. And they basically say, well, who else would have a wad of cash except a drug dealer? Well, this kid had a wad of cash because he was leaving to L.A. He was taking his savings and he was going to another city.
Or somebody like me who just doesn't trust banks.
Or exactly, right. There's all sorts of reasons. So parents who have had heroin, their son or daughter is addicted to heroin, living in their home, they've had their home taken away by police officers, again, without any charge, actually, without any conviction. And so this is, again, a product of the war on drugs is our civil rights and our civil liberties have just been decimated, and communities of color, especially poor communities of color in the inner city, have felt this more than anyone else, to the point where they feel like the police are their enemy.
Absolutely. Now, okay, we talk about them becoming part of the criminal justice system. How much